Justice and I, as you might know or not know, do come from different sides of the political spectrum, but I think that's how No Labels, I guess, kind of works out. But so we can talk a little bit, I guess, how we got into politics. I know if this story sounds a little rehearsed, I'm sorry. I've been recycling in all of my essays for internships and grants and jobs and study abroad and all that stuff. But so when I was 4 years old, back in kindergarten, I knew my parents were Republicans, so naturally I had to be a Democrat, but I didn't know anything about the people themselves, so I still supported George Bush. And one day in kindergarten, late October, this kid in my class, Sam Clockenkemper, who I still hate to this day, asked me what political party I was, and I told him I was a Democrat. And then he asked me who I was voting for in the election, because, you know, 4-year-olds can totally vote. And I said I was voting for George Bush. And then he told me I couldn't do that because you're not allowed to vote for someone another party, apparently, to 4-year-old logic. So I threw a marker at his head, and I got nap time taken away that day, but I think it was worth it. And then from then on, every 4 years, there was some sort of varied political event, either yelling at my grown man of a neighbor for his t-shirt that I disagreed with in 2004, or spearheading the Green Party campaign in 8th grade, because, you know, the Democrats and Republicans were too mainstream for me. And then finally getting to vote my senior year and using it as an excuse to be late to religion class, because why not? But then after that, it seemed kind of inevitable that I would study politics at college, and kind of worked out well from there. But
well, unlike Paige, I did vote when I was 4, because we had the little kindergarten election boxes set up, and it was George Bush and Al Gore, and I didn't know who to vote for, because I didn't know who either of them were. My dad was a former history professor, and every night, starting when I was 5, like in kindergarten, we went through, and he would give me 5 presidents, starting from Washington. We'd go through Monroe, and 5 presidents every night. I would recite them until I got down to George Bush, and he would give me cues. Like, I couldn't remember who would come after Rutherford Hayes, and he'd be like, "Think of a big orange cat," and I'd be like, "Oh, James Garfield." Oh, way to go, Dad. A very, very nerdy childhood, but loved it. And one of my favorite things about elections is that after each presidential election, I get to add one name. So far since kindergarten, I've gotten to add Barack Obama. And I was really upset when Romney lost, just because I couldn't add another name to my list. So I've always kind of considered, you know, after I go through George to George, and then I add Barack at the end, and now who do I get to add next? And I have a hope, and it's a very, very unrealistic and optimistic hope, that it's Jon Huntsman. And Jon Huntsman is a character, he's like the 3rd character in this story of No Labels. Mm-hmm. And you will hopefully meet him at some point next year. But he's the former... Yeah, we're working on that very intensively. Jon Huntsman is the former governor of Utah, which my family's from. He's an awesome guy. Welcome. He's an awesome guy. He was a conservative Republican, but at the same time he believes in like civil unions and global warming and climate change and evolution. So he's sane. He's a sane Republican, which is something fun.
I vote for him, which is saying something.
That is, yeah, that's saying something. And he actually served as ambassador to China under President Obama. But I was introduced to Jon Huntsman my senior year, and I fell in love with this guy. And I've never had a sports hero, and I've never had like a superhero as a kid. Like I've never had like one of those like, oh, I'm gonna be just like Batman one day. But senior year, I kind of found my childhood hero, and it was Jon Huntsman. So Paige and I, we met in Professor Hatcher's Politics 101 class, and during the day, we had an in-class research assignment where we looked up various political organizations, and one of them was No Labels. And so we'd go to the webpage, all of our laptops out, and we'd go, and I go to No Labels front page, and lo and behold, it's Jon Huntsman. So automatically, I fall in love. And that's how we kind of started No Labels. And then Paige had the idea to start a chapter.
So then that was kind of the start of that. We talked about No Labels briefly after that. We were both really interested in the organization. Justice because of his massive boner for John Huntsman, and me because I thought it was a really good organization that had a great mission that I believed in, but different strokes for different blokes. And then anyway, our last semester, we both got to go to TISL, which is the Tennessee Intercollegiate State Legislature program, and with Professor Hatcher and a few other awesome people who are interested in politics. And while we were there, we got to have dinner with Professor Hatcher in Nashville, and we were talking to her about, hey, you know what, we've just done the whole Congress shebang this weekend. It's obviously not working super well, just a lot of yelling, even when it's a bunch of 21-year-olds instead of 50-year-olds. And then, so we decided we're actually going to do this and found a college chapter, and we looked into it. Looked at the website, saw how that worked, and we started the Sewanee chapter of No Labels at the end of last semester. We were going to go through the SGA, make it official, all that jazz, because we thought we had to do that before we started having meetings. And then when it came time to present to the SGA, we found out afterwards that you need to have meetings before you could get approved by the SGA, and we thought it was the other way around, so we don't have, I guess, whatever legitimacy comes from being back then, funding, money.
Funding, whatever that is.
Yeah, but we're going to reapply for funding at the end of this semester and hopefully get money to start doing stuff that's not talking at people, but...
And so we talked a lot about No Labels, but we actually haven't talked about what No Labels is. No Labels is a national organization, and its motto is the politics of problem solving. And there are several current congressmen that are members of, and women that are members of it. Former Congressman Governor Huntsman is the national co-chair and national co-president. And what it's aimed at is not. It does not have a political agenda. It is not aimed at accomplishing ideas of ideology in the sense of economic issues, social issues, foreign affairs issues, that type of thing. It's focused on making our government work. And that's not an easy thing to do. We find ourselves right now at a point in American history that Professor Hatcher has called the era of divided government. What that means is the White House is not held by a certain party for longer than 2 terms, 3 at the most. Congress flips back and forth majority-wise, and has so for the past 2 decades, as we just witnessed in November. And there's very little that gets done. Compared to earlier in the 20th century, there's a very disturbingly small amount of major legislation that's passed through. The state of our government is not good, and we are a great country. We have the largest economy, the largest military, but the state of our government is not good.
But on that note, No Labels is not about going back to the good old days of, institutionalized racism and most of the people in this room not being allowed to vote. I think Ben and Justice are probably the only ones who'd have that opportunity if we truly went back to those times. Our country has, while it was founded on great ideals, has always had problems, and No Labels is about striving towards a future where we have a government that not only works, but works for the people who elected them. And so I get a lot of questions, about oh, well, how can you call yourself a Democrat when you're a part of an organization called No Labels? No Labels is not about rejecting your political party. It's about not using your political party or other people's political party or identifications as a knee-jerk reaction for rejecting whatever they believe in. It's about opening up discourse and focusing on the politics of problem solving rather than saying, oh, well, that person is a Republican, I'm not going to work with them, or that person's a Democrat, I'm not going to work with them, instead of just about opening up the discourse and thinking beyond someone's political label so we can actually get stuff done.
Right. So what our goal is here at Sewanee is to add to the Sewanee political community, and we consider the WIC part of the Sewanee political community, the College Dems and College Republicans, the Political Engagement House. All these political organizations are something that we've No Labels has kind of entered in and said, oh, by the way, we're going to call this the Sewanee political community. And what we want to do to that is bring a voice that doesn't advocate for one angle, one issue, one side of the electorate. we angle for the electorate to work, and for the electorate to actually be there. We want to add a space, a conversation on campus where you don't have to be a politics major to know what's going on in our government, what's going on in America. Because these are issues that we are burdened with. We are very much burdened with the issues that are being handled right now. Which is unlike the generation in office right now. They don't have these issues. They never did. We will. It's important to know what's going on. It's important to know your civics, to know your government, to know who the Speaker of the House is, to know which party's in the majority in the Senate. And if you don't feel bad, but feel bad. But no. And that's what we want to do. We want to create an environment where you can talk about politics in a sense that nobody will criticize you or raise questions or spit rhetoric at you because they disagree. It's a place where you can talk about, well, that's cool, that's cool. How does the government do that? How does this institution of America do that? How does the president get this done? Go ahead.
So what we've been doing at the No Labels meetings we've been hosting, it's been a little bit intermittent this semester just because, I don't know, everyone at Sewanee is a very busy person, but what we've been doing in our meetings is not only trying to look at political issues like of our nation at large, but also issues at Sewanee, because, you know, there's definitely a huge intersection there. And, you know, we also, for those of you who are at PPR, we also talked a lot about that there. But we think by creating an environment, one that we definitely saw kind of a void at Sewanee, where you can have political discussions without people going on Yik Yak afterwards and saying like, oh, well, this organization only is a voice for these people. We don't want that to happen with No Labels. We want No Labels to be a chance for everyone to get their voices out there. And even if you disagree with someone, say, hey, you know what? I disagree with you, but I respect you as a person, so we're going to talk about your arguments, and I'm not going to attack you for who you are. And that's definitely something that's really important to both Justice and I moving forward with No Labels at Sewanee.
And I don't know about Paige, and I'm sure actually, I do know, I know Paige has gotten questions about why we do this, why do you start this club, and you know, why do you do this when in a very unpopular time for moderation. And it's because the government we have is the best on earth. It is.
We don't agree on everything. That's healthy.
It is. No, that right there. That right there. I would say that the government, the democracy that America has. Let's rephrase this. America's democracy is the longest lasting democracy in the history of government. If you think the Catholic Church is democracy, then we can
say democracy is the longest lasting thing too. It doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Okay.
Hash it out, let's go.
Fight. Our democracy is the longest lasting on earth. That is a fact. It's hard to phrase this. I got really sentimental about it when I was writing this in the library before Paige came up. Basically,
sorry,
I get sentimental about these things. It's kind of sad. When there's no passion that anybody gives our government, no passion from it. If you're the staunchest, bleeding heart liberal to the most nut job redneck conservative, no passion, and everything in between, no passion toward our government matters if our government refuses to work. And so, thinking of that, not one person can change the government. Not one person can make our government work. Not one person can end this hyper-partisan bullshit that's going on. Excuse me, I'm nervous full of ladies.
Not a thing. Not a thing.
And you can cuss.
There's no higher moral fiber that goes with.
Very soon it's going to strike you down.
There's no one person that can solve it. But I find what fuels my passion, what really gets me up to do this, and what really just makes me truly happy, is taking what little step I can. And if that little step is founding a labels chapter at Sewanee, I don't care if one person or 100 persons show up at the meeting. If there's any interest in this, that's what makes me happy. And yeah.
We're not all about serious, sentimental bullshit, although that's something we always advocate for because, as any of you who know me, I do love a good, intense political discussion. But we also are going to work on more, I guess, entertaining ways to get the community at large involved. So if any of you guys have any ideas for that, that'd be awesome. But one idea that we have been floating around for a while that I think all of you will enjoy is we're working on a No Labels Cuff and Chug formal later in the semester. The only requirement is that you are supposed to ask someone to the formal of a different political ideology than you. It doesn't necessarily have to be diametrically opposed, like Democrat, Republican, but if there is a libertarian you hate or a democratic socialist, just ask someone different political ideology than you. You get to spend the entire night to them, handcuffed and drinking alcohol and hopefully getting into a lot of really fun arguments. So,
I mean, can you imagine a more fun
it would be so
great.
We're going to make this happen later this semester. That's one of the more entertaining things we're planning. But, aside from that, we also do have meetings every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. in Walshall at 210. We will be having one tomorrow night. So we'd love it if you guys want to come out to that, spread the word, bring your friends. We just do some routine stuff, and then we just get to talk about stuff for as long as y'all want. So it's really open, really great environment. Oh, on that note, while we do work with No Labels as a national organization, they do have while they take stance on policy issues such as international involvement, the economy, healthcare. They, as an organization, since they're a registered 501c4, they don't take stances on what would be considered social issues. So, abortion, not straight marriage, pretty much anything that would fall on that side of the political spectrums, they don't take official stances on. So, as an organization at Sewanee, as an organization, we don't take stances. As individuals, obviously, we have very passionate stances about those subjects, but we welcome open discourse on pretty much anything y'all want to talk about.
And like I said, but I'm tickled to death that people even know about this. It's been fun, and I can't wait to see it grow. Fortunately, we're both probably going to be abroad next semester, so we are going to have to put this in the hands of somebody who will nurture this precious baby until we return. But thank you guys very much for letting us talk about it. If you guys know George Pratt, he's my roommate, and if I mention No Labels now, and he's just like, just don't say any more about it. Just don't talk about it tonight. Just one night. But be that as it may, we're very excited. Does anybody have any questions, or did you have anything else to follow?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much. Yeah, whatever questions.
Absolutely.
What's one thing that neither of you will budge on? What's one issue that neither of you will budge on? And how do you deal with that?
Gay marriage.
Really? Okay. And how do you deal with that?
Wait, what do you...
Like, what's something that's, like politically divisive for the two of you?
Oh, for us?
Yeah.
I thought you meant like a personal issue.
No, we agree on that.
Well,
yeah.
personal or political issues.
Something that we would disagree on that would not budge.
Okay.
What do you disagree with me?
I know you
Dude,
like
this is such
so they
agree.
Yeah, but all this were that moment we were like,
Immigration, Obamacare.
Trickle down economics.
Hillary Clinton.
dude, what about that email scandal though?
Oh.
Pantsuits in general.
I don't like pantsuits. They're not my fave. I think I can own my femininity and be powerful. So
I
like
love
pantsuits.
pantsuits. I love pantsuits.
Okay, there you go. We're not budging on pantsuits. Okay,
Sorry.
Question?
Yeah. What's one topic that you all have discussed where one of you ended up changing your perspective on it because of how you understood a deeper perspective through the discussion?
I would say we talk quite often about political candidates and their approach to the office that they hope to be assuming. And I talked with Paige a lot, and she has really shown me some prospective candidates for Senate for you covered Kay Hagan, right?
Yeah.
Senate and the presidency, and especially with the Republican nomination. And I've changed, I think, my opinion on several prospective candidates, both successful and unsuccessful, just from seeing them in a light that did not necessarily match up with my own.
Thanks for sharing. And for me, Justice is definitely a lot of really solid conversations about, I guess, looking at things from a different perspective politically. Like, you know, when I thought of politics before, a lot of my conversations with Justice, I always think of things like very much on a national scale or even scale of large cities, you know. A lot of the really important points Justice brings to the conversations about, like, okay, well, how is this going to affect people on, like, a very small town scale, like, on an individual scale, not just a national basis. And that's something you really do have to consider when you're looking at lawmaking and policy, because, you know, it's not just, like, I don't know, America isn't it's a collective of millions of people, so it's definitely something that's been really important for me in, like, shaping my political views and figuring out how specifics of policy details will work, so.
Okay, serious question. House of Cards or West Wing?
Ooh, West Wing.
There it is.
Oh,
damn.
Divided.
Obviously.
I've never seen West Wing.
Oh my god.
Teacher told you to on Christmas break. She gave both of us that assignment.
No.
I'm telling her.
I've never seen it.
You're
And
gonna get in
she knows.
trouble.
She knows she's not happy.
You're gonna become obsessed with
It's
Josh
so
Lyman.
good. Holy shit.
With who?
Josh Lyman. Just
You will. No, you're gonna be obsessed with President Bartlett.
He's
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
be Josh Lyman.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I've
It's
been
kind
meaning
of
to watch
our
it. It's on
world,
Netflix, right?
Yeah.
I see it. I mean, I see it like it's number one on recommended for you every single time I go on there. But
Yeah.
I've just never had the heart to start it because I have it like such a fantasy in my head of what it's like, and I
It lives up to everything. It's so
Yeah.
good.
After
Yeah.
season 5, don't worry so much, but
Whatever you do, just
Okay.
don't watch West Wing and House of Cards back to back. It's so depressing. It's not even funny.
Not if you watch House of Cards first and
Okay,
then
yeah.
watch West Wing,
Yeah.
because then you're gonna hope that real life is much more like West Wing.
oh,
yeah.
well, I'm about to start season 6 or episode 6 of season 3 of House of Cards.
I watched 6 and 7 today, and 6 is when everything goes.
Okay, I'm still finishing
Wait,
season
I'm
2.
sorry.
I'm still
6
finishing
is when
season
just
2.
like shit hits. Not like insane, but like it's phenomenal.
I don't have problems.
I cried in episode 2 just because.
Oh,
I cried in episode 1.
You need to watch West Wing.
The West Wing will.
It's
everything.
Alright.
I have a real question.
Yeah.
Not that I don't care deeply about your TV preferences, because I do love TV. But I'm just curious how you, like, I know that there's no official stance on, like, social issues, but when it comes to things like equal pay or abortion, where, like, a lot of people will argue that it's a fundamental, like, human right for women to have these rights, like, how does government work in that aspect? Like, how do you make government work when it's a fundamental right? And, like should we be expected to hear out, like, the jerk redneck that's like, no, women should be paid less, and, like, they should be forced to have children they don't want to. Like,
Well,
how do you make government work with that person?
Well, the good news is you as an individual are not obligated to respect that person because, you know, as some people on this campus don't still seem to understand, freedom of speech only applies to the government telling you what to say. So if some asshole is saying that you don't have the right to bodily autonomy, then you can tell them to shut up, and it's not violating freedom of speech because you're not the government, which is great. But I don't know, on that note, when I was actually watching The West Wing, one of the characters on there, when she really, I can't remember her name, the blonde
Ainsley Hayes.
Ainsley Hayes really makes me sick every time. I love her, but because she's she's such an interesting character because she's very conservative, but she's a really incredible woman. And they're talking about the Equal Pay Act, and she says, I don't support this because I don't want another law. Like, I don't feel like I need another law in place saying I need equal pay because, you know, this amendment already provides that for me as a person, even though when that amendment was written, it wasn't talking about women as people, which, you know, I struggled a lot with because I do support the Equal Pay Act, but, like, I saw where she was coming from. I was like, okay, this is interesting, but what I eventually figured out, and this is how I think goes into everything in the government in that aspect, is that we can think that things will work out and we don't necessarily, like, we shouldn't have to have the government step in and say, okay, we need to protect these bodies from people trying to control them. We need to ensure that women are getting paid as much as men. Like, that shouldn't have to be a thing. The government shouldn't have to step in there, but unfortunately, when the problem continues to persist and people try to use the law, especially in the cases of abortion, to impose those regulations, that's when I think it's important to include some sort of legal, I guess, basis for defense, because you can argue about stuff until you're blue in the face, but unfortunately the only thing a lot of people will listen to is like a hard, like, set in stone law that protects that right, which is honestly why I'm in favor of, for a lot of issues today, not only just making them laws, but including them in our Constitution. For instance, the right to vote is actually not specified in the Constitution as a hard right for every American citizen, and I feel like if we included the right to vote as an amendment to the Constitution, we could use that as the basis for striking down a lot of voter ID practices in America right now that are being used to suppress immigrants from voting. And so, I don't know if that answers your question at all.
And I would give a view that is conservative in nature, but is aimed at the focus of solving a governmental issue, such as how are we supposed to let government decide a fundamental issue that is disagreed upon by two separate sets of people. And you cannot get the crazy redneck to agree with the diehard pro-choicer. Right, with you, exactly. And what I would say is, this is one of the prime moments where we can look back in our history and take federalism at its best and say, for an issue such as this, we have the blessed problem of having such a diverse population. John Cochran and I were actually talking last night about very few countries other than the United States have such a diverse culture pattern, especially North and South, liberal Democrat. And what you can do is say, in this instance, it will probably be best for this to be left to the states. Because you will always have a population in Tennessee, for instance, Mississippi, that disagrees with those fundamental beliefs of the majority of people in Oregon, Washington, California, New England. And when you can't get everyone to agree, our national identity cannot be one of frustration and obstruction. I think our national identity in this case is to embrace our unique approach, the one we invented, of federalism, and say, this is the best way to do it. That's how I would approach it.
I disagree when safety comes involved in that case, because, if you let Mississippi outlaw abortion, a lot more women and people with vaginas will be dying, so not really down for letting them cause that, but... Which
is where the federal government can come in and practice caution. But
I guess is it letting government work in terms of allowing, like, federalism and states and restrictions to occur, or is it, like, letting government work in terms of a hard read of Roe v. Wade and, like, this is a woman's right? Like,
letting states work until they fuck
up. I'm just interested in kind of...
Well, and right
that's two different avenues of letting the government
Right
work.
now, Tennessee is fighting in the Supreme Court to let their laws discriminating against same-sex couples and the recognition of other states' same-sex couples' relationships in Tennessee. They're fighting that issue in the Supreme Court right now. It would be very hard to see Tennessee on its own, of its own will, to legalize same-sex marriage in the next decade. In the next two, maybe. But the Supreme Court's about to decide for us in June.
Yeah.
In June, and I would be willing to bet my bottom dollar that in June, all states in America will be forced to recognize gay marriage. Fine by me. Not fine by other people. And that's where you have to kind of consider the balance between what a constitutional interpretation is and what deference to the states can achieve.
So when y'all look to the future of the organization, do you see it primarily as something to increase tolerant discussion at Sewanee, or do you want to increase people's involvement in political issues outside of Sewanee too, whether they're left wing or right wing?
Both is I think you need the discussion in order to get people interested in the issues, because if you grow up in an environment or are educated in an environment where you taught, oh well, if you believe this, then you're this type of person, or only these people support this issue, and there's no flexibility in those issues, and there's no room for growth, like this is how it's always been, this is how it always will be, then you're not going to care. It's going to seem futile, and you're not going to want to get involved with those issues, but...
And you're never going to be able to look at somebody who believes in the choice of a woman or in the identity of a person with a certain sexual orientation, and tell them you disagree with them, and they're never going to believe you. They're never going to agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point of having a belief system, a system of values. And I think the only way you can understand how problems get solved is when you sit down and say, we don't have to prove which side is right. If you believe the side is not right, I will never, 99% chance, I will not convince you otherwise. But we can sit down and talk about how government, the art of giving power from one person to the other, how government can make sure you are okay and I'm okay, that my fist does not hit your chin, and I have room to swing, and my fist will not hit your chin. That's the point of no labels. It's governing to where everybody can get something. It's not making sure one side is always right or this side is right on this issue. We need to do everything they do. Sometimes like slavery and racism. Like,
Wait,
there was
where
obviously
is
a
it?
correct side to that. But right now, most of the problems.
Did you think that's
I'm so confused where that's
So
going.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that's popped in. But
Yeah.
slavery and
Yeah.
racism, there's obviously a correct side to that argument. But some arguments, you're never going to convince both sides to agree on the same.
And yeah, that's where we were. Like, I mean, honestly, like, less than, Jesus Christ, like, that wasn't that long ago. That was not, I don't know, like, less than 50 years ago. I mean, there are so many in the country who still believe they were on the right side of that argument. And, you know, that's probably where we'll end up in another 50 years with different issues. But I think the point Justice is trying to make is that, you know, we are not here as an organization, you know, to say, this is what we think, this is what everyone else is thinking. It's to give people the tools necessary to have informed, open discussions and not go in thinking, I'm not going to change my mindset, I'm going to change the other person's mindset, but rather being open to new ideas because, you know, I'm never going to change my mind on certain issues, but hearing what people believe different from me still allows me to grow as a person and in my beliefs because, you know, then I can say, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I'm going to try to think and see if, you know, I can come up with a solution or, wait, I can make this ideology work because, you know, if I'm going to go into politics, I'm going to be seeing that opposition all the time. And so, you know, going back to your question, if we give people those tools, then hopefully they'll not only become interested in issues and getting involved with them, but also become interested in doing it in a way that can actually move ideas forward rather than spouting, like, reinforcing the same rhetoric at the same audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
Go someone.
I think she had hers up first.
Is there a goal for like community involvement at all? Because I feel like there's a huge polarization between campus politics and
There are. And there are. What we want is, there are actually several ways you can get involved. I'm trying to figure out which one to start with first. You can just join. You can go to political events. But actually, it's just as important, if not more important, to go to other political events. Go to college Republicans or Democrats if you feel strongly on one side or the other. Go to the Political Action House when they have an event. Go to the Wake. Go to a Tuesday Toast. These are all political events that talk about real world issues. The only way you can actually be good at knowing what's going on is if you take the time to know what's going on. Go to events. And mention it to your friends. Have you heard of No Labels? That's all it takes to plant a seed.
Yeah.
And that doesn't limit itself to Sewanee. For community engagement, ask other people at other schools. Have you heard of No Labels? Or do you guys have a No Labels chapter at your school? That's all it takes to plant a seed. Otherwise, here for community involvement, we have just weekly meetings that are probably the most lax run meetings, with the exception of like 11 out of 12 fraternities. We have like the most lax meetings that we just encourage you to talk about politics in a way that you cannot talk most anywhere else out here. Nobody here is highly opinionated to the point that that's the point of the meeting. We don't talk about opinions at the meeting. We talk about, well, how can this problem be solved?
We do talk about opinions. It just we use it in like
but
a
that's
constructive way.
That's not the focus of it. The focus is not to spout your opinion. The focus is to talk about why people have those opinions and what they can get from those. But to answer your question, community involvement, come to meetings, go to political events across campus, know what's going on, and that's what I would say.
Yeah. And the only thing I'd add to that is just like, I don't know, when you're reading about events in the news or what's going on, don't just think about, like, what do I think about this? Think about, like, okay, if I think this is a problem, how can I change this? What is a productive way I could do to fix this? So, like, say if you saw something in the news that you disagreed with, like, about using drones in Syria. Okay, well, I disagree with the use of drones, but it seems a lot more difficult, just like on a substantial issue, to fix it. Okay, then you look in, okay, why do we use drones? Okay, then from there, what are alternatives to accomplishing these ends that we could go through the military and start looking into research on that and figure out a way to actually do things with them. Don't just formulate opinions to, like, argue with people on. Actively think about solutions and alternatives if you disagree with something our government is doing.
What is one aspect that you think that this time you're suggesting someone invest in becoming informed and in the know? What is one aspect that you think really makes someone's life more fulfilled? Or what is the one way that if they choose not to be informed, that they are deprived?
It's proven by political science that the more enlightened you are about government, the more likely you are to vote. Voter turnout increases with the likelihood of voter turnout increases with your political knowledge. And I've said it before, and I will say it again, and I will have this written on my tombstone. If everyone voted in America, not one politician in office right now would be in office in that instance. I would attest that that's true. The point of the matter is, the more you know, the more this country knows, the better off I think everybody is. And in terms of personal fulfillment, you feel better when you know what's going on. You start to ignore these petty conversations, like on Yikik or on Facebook, when you see this. You start to ignore it, because you say, that's not constructive. When you know what's going on, you don't have to have those conversations. You can realize what's being done, what's not being done, and then you can contribute your time and energy to the productive things.
On that note, I think we do have kind of a cycle in this country, because, you know, we're talking so much about, like, what you can do to go out there and get educated, but unfortunately, in a lot of cases, so many people in this country don't have that opportunity to get educated. You know, I was so lucky growing up having parents who encouraged me to figure stuff out, do research, go vote, all that stuff, and there are so many people who don't have that opportunity in that environment. So I feel like also, if we strive towards a country where our education system is improved, not only as a whole, because Lord knows it needs it, but also specifically in a civic education sense, where students are taught the importance of voting, how much of a difference their voice makes, and knowing that they have power in this country, and given the tools to go out and learn about things rather than just listening to what their parents tell them to believe in, then we can further create an environment where, you know, people are able to have that fulfillment, and then that will perpetuate, because then you'll have people who appreciate the importance of education, who are making the votes, and they'll vote for that to continue, and then that's how America becomes to suck marginally less. So,
very true.
Yeah. Void-wise, if you don't vote, well, then you're just going to be one of those people bitching about the government forever and won't have actually contributed anything to the election, and I'll probably just laugh at you. But
if you don't vote, you don't get to bitch about the government. That is a rule I would give my children. Actually, that was a rule I was given too.
Yeah.
That said, I can't talk about politics unless I vote.
It's like, if you don't agree with the system, you're still allowed to deface the ballot. You don't have to vote for anyone. You can express your displeasure by defacing the ballot, doing a write-in, like Farty McDick Pants, whatever you want. It sounds immature, but you can do it, and you will be expressing your displeasure. But if you don't vote, and you don't take some sort of action, be it positive or negative, the government will not only not know, they won't care. There won't be any way of acknowledging that. It's so easy to pretend people don't exist when they don't vote. But you can still, if you don't agree with any of the major party candidates, if you like voting for third party candidates who are useless, still go in there, still put something on the ballot, just to let them know that you really don't like the system right now. But.
What would you? Oh, MC, do you want to go? What is the most pressing political issue in Swanee? From your perspective and from your experience, I guess.
Classism, I'd say, just because it's, so many of our political issues today, including racial biases and how our disciplinary system works. So much of it is so dependent on class here at Swanee. I was talking to someone at Posse Plus Retreat. One of their friends had been accused of sexual assault, and whether wrongly or not, they were expelled by the Honor Council for what they did, or what they were accused of doing. And yet, I know someone else who was accused of the exact same crime, also found guilty and were suspended for a semester. The difference between the two individuals was that the one who was expelled was on a lot of financial aid and a lot of merit scholarships. The one who was only kicked out for a semester was paying full tuition. And their situations were incredibly similar, and I have seen, unfortunately, similar instances with disciplinary actions taken here in class. The issue of class dress in itself is one, unfortunately, that's become inherently classist. It's supposed to be about showing respect for your professors, but instead it's become about who can afford a Barber jacket. And I think if we address classism here at Swanee, we can address a lot of issues, including how people of different races and genders are marginalized and treated by the disciplinary system here.
I would say there are a lot of specific issues. Classism is one of them. Sexism is one of them. Sexual assault is a huge one. I'd say the number one issue that would cause me to say that something's wrong is the fact that we're organized in a way that the ones who get the most recognition are the ones that are not doing anything. Inaction, is the biggest one. Those who fight for their issues that they're passionate about. The ones who are volunteering to spend time doing this and X and Y. And the ones who are not doing that, on the opposite end of the scale, are the ones who are entitled to the efforts and to the fruits of what the workers, like the working people, are the ones who volunteer their time, their passions, and their energy. The others are entitled to reap what they sow. And I would say, that's a vague answer. I hope you follow me on that. But there are people who are passionate. There are people who do things that are not drink. And there are people who do things that are not drink, and that consists of smoking pot. And that latter group very much takes the benefits of the efforts of the other people. And that can fall under a myriad of things. That can fall under the umbrella of sexual assault. It does, actually. It can fall under the umbrella of sexism and of classism, for sure. That's kind of how our traditions fade away, and that's kind of how we lose our identity as Swanee. Also, growing student size. I hate that. I do hate that. That one just popped in, and I would actually put that one above that. Yeah. Growing student size, that's a big one right now. In terms of political, like actually political, that deals with administration.
Yeah.
A whole lot of us.
On that note, I would say, Swanee is such a reactionary community, and I think that's a huge problem. You see people, like this was talking about, taking a stand and fighting for things, and you don't hear any opposition about it until it happens, and people decide suddenly, I have an opinion on this, I have to react.
Exactly. The people who didn't even make any type of time, commitment, effort, energy, anything in the first place are the ones who get to complain about that.
Right. Like the Diane and McClurg last semester, I didn't see anyone before that protesting say, hey, let's defend this guy. That wasn't murder. But as soon as the die-in happened, everyone suddenly decided they had an opinion about it. Or after Swanee monologues, people, or literacy. Last semester I wrote an opinion article in the Purple talking about Amendment 1 and why we should say no on it. And I didn't hear anything about it from anyone until one of my friends who's on the Swanee Republican Facebook page showed me a picture someone had taken of my opinions article and called me a dumb liberal bitch for writing my opinion and saying I didn't know anything. And you know what? If that person had said something beforehand, started an open discussion with me about it
Or
instead
had
of just
contributed to the Swanee
exactly, they were talking about let's write a response. You know what? I never heard a response from them. I heard I was being called a bitch behind my back in a way that was not productive to open discourse at all. And I think the reactionary, that's a really dumb problem. It's a really dumb way to handle things.
Yeah,
It's not going to fix anything.
Culture.
Yeah.
For sure. How long did we have the cliteracy signs up before the clit actually got there?
They'd been up for.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, no one said shit about
I was
why is
gonna
there a clit on these signs?
Yeah, I was gonna say I saw
didn't know what
nothing.
it looks
I
like.
saw nothing about cliteracy until I walked into the library and it was just